it seems like this is something that's either on your mind right now, or maybe you're just thinking ahead and want to be ready if and when it happens again.
Even though heartbreak can feel like it's the most personal thing in the world, pretty much everyone goes through it at some point. The good news is there's tons of research out there on how our minds and bodies actually react when this happens and what can actually help.
Heartbreak isn't just, a metaphor. It can actually really hurt. I mean, we all know what it feels like when, your chest gets tight or your stomach drops, but it seems like it goes deeper than that, right?
I mean, we all say heartache, but it turns out there's a real reason for that. Brain studies actually show that the same parts of the brain that light up when we're in physical pain, those same areas, become active when we're going through heartbreak.
So it's like our brains are basically treating emotional pain like a real injury.
And sometimes it even goes further than that. There's this thing called broken heart syndrome, which can actually cause the same symptoms as a heart attack. It's triggered by intense emotional stress, like if you suddenly break up with someone or if someone close to you dies.
Whoa, okay, so that's not just feeling heartbroken, that's like serious medical stuff.
Luckily, it's pretty rare, but it does show just how strong the connection is between what we're thinking and feeling and what's going on in our bodies. It really shows how much emotional pain can affect us physically.
One of the studies, the vitality study, it actually breaks down some of the not so obvious things that happen to our bodies when we go through heartbreak.
The most common thing that happens is losing your appetite. About 43% of people experience that, which makes sense when you think about it. When you're that emotionally drained, food is probably the last thing on your mind. But then almost as common at about 40% is messing up your sleep. Just try and imagine trying to function when you've barely slept for days on end. It's exhausting.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the study even mentions things like just random aches and pains, heart palpitations, and even problems with digestion. It's like your whole body is just like rebelling against you.
In a way, it is. Your body's basically reacting to the stress and chaos of a breakup just like it would to any other huge stressful thing. And that's why it's so important to realize these physical symptoms are real. It's not just about feeling sad. Your body's literally going through something.
So knowing all of that, where do we even start to put our lives back together? All these articles and videos have a ton of advice, but it's honestly kind of overwhelming to know where to even begin.
I think a good place to start is just to admit that you're grieving. It's easy to try and just shove those feelings down and pretend they're not there, but just letting yourself grieve is like the first big step.
So you're saying we should actually like lean into the sadness and the anger, the confusion, all of it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't judge your feelings, just let them happen. Cry if you need to, scream into a pillow, write in a journal, whatever helps you work through those feelings, because trying to just bury them will only make it harder to heal in the long run.
And that's where the whole self-care thing comes in.
Yeah.
But maybe we should talk about what that really means, because it's one of those words that gets thrown around a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, self-care when you're dealing with heartbreak, it's not about, going to the spa or buying a bunch of stuff. Although, I mean, those things can be nice too sometimes. It's really about taking care of your basic needs, the stuff we often forget about when we're hurting.
So we're talking about getting enough sleep, eating food that's actually good for you, maybe taking a break from social media.
Exactly. It's all about creating a space for yourself that feels safe and supportive, both for your body and your mind.
And a lot of the stuff you mentioned, exercise. Let's be honest, when you're feeling this emotionally drained, the last thing you want to do is go to the gym.
Oh, I know. I mean, curling up on the couch with a good movie sounds way more appealing. But even moving around a little bit, like going for a walk outside or doing some yoga, can be a huge help. It's not about pushing yourself super hard. It's about getting those feel-good chemicals flowing and letting your body release some of that pent-up stress.
That makes sense. It's about listening to your body and what feels right, not forcing yourself to do something super intense.
Exactly. And actually, one of the articles had this really helpful technique for this. It's a breathing exercise called box breathing.
Okay, now I'm interested. Tell me more about that.
It's super easy. You just breathe in and count to 4, hold your breath for 4 counts, then breathe out for 4 counts, and then hold your breath again for 4.
So it's like making a square shape with your breath.
Exactly. Yeah. You can do this as many times as you need. It's a really good way to calm your nerves, reduce anxiety, and just bring yourself back to the present when all those thoughts and feelings start to get too much.
That sounds super helpful and like something you can do pretty much anywhere. I'm definitely going to try it.
Yeah, you should. It's a simple thing, but it can really make a difference. It's like having a little toolkit for your emotions.
So we've got acknowledging how we feel, taking care of ourselves, and getting some gentle movement in. What else should we be thinking about as we go through this healing process?
One thing that comes up a lot is whether you should reach out to people for support or just be alone with your feelings. And actually, the stuff we read had some different opinions about this.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Some were all about spending time alone with your thoughts, while others said it's important to connect with people who care about you.
Right. And I think the key is realizing that there are different kinds of support, and different times in the healing process might need different approaches.
What do you mean by different kinds of support?
Well, there's emotional support, which is the kind we usually think of first, like having someone to listen to you and tell you it's okay to feel the way you feel and just offer comfort. Then there's practical support, which could be like helping out with chores or childcare, or even just running errands if you're feeling totally overwhelmed.
Right, so it's not just about having people to talk to, it's also about having people who can help make things a little easier for you.
Exactly. And then there's what you might call informational support, which is like getting advice or guidance or finding helpful resources. This could be from family or friends, but it could also mean talking to a therapist or a counselor.
So figuring out what kind of support we need can help us know what to do in each moment.
And that's where understanding the different phases of healing comes in. So right after a breakup, in that initial shock, it's totally normal to want to just withdraw a little bit. Give yourself some space to process all those raw emotions.
Yeah, like you're going into like a protective little cocoon or something.
Exactly. But as you start to move through that grieving process, that's when connecting with your support system becomes really important. Having you trust people who can listen without judgment, that can be a huge part of healing.
So it's all about finding that balance between honoring your need for some alone time and realizing when you need to connect with others.
Exactly. And it's so important to remember that asking for help is not a weakness. It's actually a strength. It takes real courage to reach out and let people know what you're going through and what you need.
And remember that support doesn't always have to come from people you're super close to. One of the articles talked about finding support in online groups or communities.
Yeah, those can be amazing, especially if you don't want to burden your friends and family, or if you just want to be around people who truly get what you're going through. There's just something about that shared experience that can be so comforting.
It's like knowing you're not alone in this, that other people have gone through the same thing and come out okay on the other side.
Right. And sometimes even just shifting your focus away from yourself can be surprisingly helpful. One of the videos you sent talked about how powerful it can be to focus on others, like by doing something kind or helpful for someone else.
Oh, that reminds me of that quote. The best way to cheer yourself up is to try to cheer someone else up.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It could be like volunteering at an animal shelter, or donating to a cause you believe in, or even just helping out a friend or neighbor.
So it's like taking all that energy, all that pain, and channeling it into something good and positive.
Yep. And what's cool is when we help other people, it changes our perspective. We realize that our problems, even though they feel so big to us, are actually just a small part of a much bigger human experience.
It's about taking a step back from our own little world and remembering that we're all connected. We all struggle and we all need help sometimes.
That's it. And speaking of finding support, something that kept coming up in the research was how helpful it can be to really immerse yourself in content that offers guidance and encouragement.
Oh, like reading self-help books or listening to podcasts about heartbreak? Because I definitely did that. There's something about hearing other people's stories and realizing you're not alone that can be so reassuring.
For sure. And it's not just about finding stories you relate to. It's about learning how to cope, finding ways to move forward, and getting fresh perspectives on what you're going through.
Like sometimes just hearing someone else put words to what you've been feeling can be so eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's what this is. I'm not going crazy. Other people feel this way too.
Exactly. It can give you a way to talk about your experience and make sense of it. And one thing I want to stress, because it came up in a lot of the articles, is don't be afraid to reach out for professional help if you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck.
Yeah. There's no shame in going to therapy or counseling. Sometimes we just need a little extra support to deal with those really tough emotions.
Definitely. A therapist can create a space where you feel safe and not judged. You can talk about how you feel, learn how to cope, and work through any deeper issues that might be making things harder.
So we've talked about being okay with our grief, taking care of ourselves, connecting with others, finding support, and maybe even getting professional help. But what about the whole getting over it thing? Because that's what we all want, right? To move on and feel happy again.
But I think we need to rethink this idea of getting over it, because it makes it sound like there's a finish line. Like you suddenly wake up one day and you're cured and all the pain is just gone. But healing from heartbreak isn't that straightforward.
Right. It's not like checking off a to-do list.
No. It's more like a dance with its own rhythm and flow. There will be days when you feel like you're making so much progress, and then other days when you feel like you're back where you started.
It's like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Exactly. And that's totally normal. The key is to be patient with yourself, not get down on yourself for those setbacks, and just keep reminding yourself that you are moving in the right direction, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes.
And to celebrate those little victories along the way too, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe one morning you realize you didn't think about your ex for hours, or you finally feel like going out with friends and having some fun again.
Absolutely. It's about noticing those moments of progress and remembering that healing takes time. There's no magic formula or set deadline.
It's about trusting the process even when it feels messy and unpredictable.
Yes. And it's about shifting your focus from what you lost to what you're gaining. Because even though heartbreak can feel like the end of the world, it can also be a chance to grow and change in incredible ways.
Okay, so now we're moving into rebuilding our lives. What does that look like?
Well, one of the biggest themes that emerged from all this research was how important it is to rediscover who you are. Because often in relationships, our identity gets kind of mixed up with our partners. So when it ends, it can feel like a part of us is missing.
It's like you have to figure out who you are all over again without that other person.
Exactly. And that can be scary and exciting at the same time. It's a chance to reconnect with your passions, your values, your dreams. It's about asking yourself, what lights me up? What makes me feel alive? What kind of life do I want to build for myself?
It's like getting to know yourself all over again, maybe even for the first time.
Yep. And that can be so empowering because it lets you be your true self and create a life that truly reflects who you are.
So heartbreak can actually help us discover ourselves and grow as people.
Absolutely. It can push us out of our comfort zone, force us to face our fears, and in the end, make us more self-aware and resilient.
It's like that image of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Painful and messy, but ultimately transformative. It sounds like even though going through heartbreak is so painful, it can also be a chance to become a stronger and more resilient version of ourselves.
There's something else that's really important that we should talk about. It came up a lot, this whole idea of forgiveness.
Oh yeah, that's interesting because, when you're still hurting so much, it can be hard to even think about forgiving the person who hurt you.
Yeah, I get that. It takes time. It's not something that just happens overnight. But forgiveness, it's really crucial for healing. And it's not about saying what they did was okay or letting them off the hook.
So it's not really about them at all, then.
Right. It's about you. It's about letting go of all that anger and resentment. It's about freeing yourself from the past so you can actually move on and not carry all that weight around with you.
It's like taking back your power.
Exactly. Forgiveness is like a gift you give yourself. And it's important to forgive yourself, too.
Oh, that's a good point. Because a lot of times we're way harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else.
Totally. We blame ourselves and question our worth. We just get stuck in those negative thought loops. Yeah. So it's really important to be kind to yourself, to remember that you made the best choices you could with what you knew at the time.
It's about giving yourself a break and allowing yourself to make mistakes and to learn from them.
And speaking of learning, one of the most amazing things that came up over and over in all this research was this idea of finding meaning in heartbreak.
I have to admit, when I first saw that, I was a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Like, how can something so painful actually have meaning?
It's a totally different way of looking at it, isn't it? Because when we're right in the middle of it, heartbreak just feels so pointless. But if you can take a step back and look at the bigger picture, you can often find some really important lessons and insights.
So it's about asking ourselves questions like, what did I learn from this? How has this changed me? What do I want to do differently from now on?
Exactly. It's about taking all that pain and using it to become wiser, to grow, to really understand ourselves and what we want out of life.
That's a really beautiful way to think about it. It's like taking that broken heart and turning it into a source of strength.
Right. And sometimes going through heartbreak can even open up doors to things you never expected. Maybe you end up taking that trip you always wanted to go on, or finally going after that new career, or reconnecting with old friends. Things you might not have had the courage or the time for before.
It's like that saying, when one door closes, another one opens. It might not be the door you were expecting, but it could lead to something even better.
And that brings us to another really important point that kept coming up, this whole idea of rediscovering joy.
Because it's so easy to get lost in all the sadness and forget about all the good things that make life worth living.
It's about remembering all those things that bring you joy, whether it's activities or hobbies or passions, anything that just lights you up inside.
So we have to make a real effort to connect with those things again, even if it feels hard at first.
Yes, because joy is like a powerful medicine for a broken heart. It reminds us that life is still beautiful, that there's still so much to be grateful for, and that we can be happy again.
And it's not about trying to replace the love you lost. It's about opening yourself up to love in all its different forms.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to say again that there's no one right way to heal from heartbreak. What works for one person might not work for another, so be patient with yourself, try different things, and figure out what feels right for you.
And remember, you are not alone in this. There's help out there if you need it. You can talk to a therapist, find a support group, or lean on your friends and family.
I want to leave you with one last thought. Heartbreak, well, it's something we all go through. It shows just how capable we are of love and connection.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into mending a broken heart with us. We hope this was helpful and gave you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you a little. And remember, you're stronger than you think, more resilient than you realize, and totally capable of creating a life filled with love, joy, and meaning.
Keep believing in yourself, keep reaching out for support, and keep moving forward one step at a time.